So, Lisa, I know we're following along with court as he is currently being arraigned. What is the latest?
Well, Katie, I can tell you that the charges that have been brought against Allen, based on the magistrate judge's reading of the charges to him, are slightly different than those previewed by U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro on Saturday night. Chiefly, the first charge against him is an attempt to assassinate the President of the United States. That's a charge that was also brought against would-be assassin Ryan Ruth, who in Florida tried to assassinate the president at Mar-a-Lago. The second charge is transportation of a firearm and ammunition in interstate commerce with the intent to commit a felony. I had predicted yesterday that that would likely be one of the charges because we know from what law enforcement has told us so far that Cole Allen got on a train in California, traveled to Washington, D.C. over Amtrak. That's an easy charge for the government to bring here, given that he traveled all of those states in between carrying the components of a firearm. And then the third is a discharge of a firearm during a crime of violence. We know that the government is also asking for life imprisonment, according to our producer who's in the courtroom right now. They are also asking for preventative detention. That's not a surprise, meaning they want him in custody indefinitely until his trial. And those are the things that we know right now. But his lawyers, appointed federal public defenders, are essentially saying that he has no criminal history. There's no reason for him to be in detention. I don't expect that a magistrate judge is going to side with Cole Allen's lawyers on this one.
All right. So, Carol, one of the questions I had was, because we can't quite tell in the video that we've seen, and there hasn't been a hard answer from any of law enforcement or anyone at the DOJ, is whether Cole Allen discharged his weapon. And it appears from this charging document that he did at least once. There are still questions about whether his discharge was the one that hit the Secret Service agent, who was thankfully okay.
Yes. A question I've had since about 10:15 p.m. on Saturday, too, Katie. There is a Secret Service source who has told me the following, and that is that the belief based on witness testimony and agents who were in that hallway and on that stairway down to the ballroom, their accounts are that the suspect, Mr. Allen, did exchange gunfire with the UD officer, the Uniform Division officer of the Secret Service, who was struck in the vest. And we are told that it is their belief, based on all those accounts, that the suspect is the person who struck the Secret Service officer. But they are waiting for the FBI's ballistic report, which I think is supposed to come back to them today. I don't know when. But they are waiting on the FBI's ballistics to be 100% certain that the witness accounts match up with those bullets and that they ensure that they tell accurately what happened here.
Part of the writings from this man, I mentioned this a moment ago, he talks about going after administration officials from most important to least important, but he leaves out Kash Patel. He specifically says not including Kash Patel. I'm wondering if you've had any conversation, Carol, with anybody inside the FBI or DOJ about that weird omission within this piece of writing.
You know, Katie, I don't know for certain what the suspect or what they believe the suspect was trying to communicate there. But Kash Patel is a very high-profile figure, and it's possible that a person struggling with mental delusions and who says in his manifesto that he believes he may be insane, or suggests he may have some problems. It's possible, really, that he fixated on Kash Patel because he's in the headlines and made this claim that he's not going to hurt him. I will tell you, from having sat at the table at the dinner next to Kash Patel, he was a table away from me, it's good that he wasn't targeted because he was struggling to, get evacuated from that room. His agent, an FBI agent, I presume, was with him trying to wave down the Secret Service. But the evacuation that night was extremely awkward and delayed for everyone but the president and the vice president. And Kash Patel was in the room for many, many minutes after the shooting, outside, and after many people hit the deck and went under the tables in the correspondents' dinner.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I don't want to suggest that anybody should be targeted and not justifying any of it. I wonder why he made an exception for Kash Patel. That's really just the only reason. And then, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to add that the charges Lisa was describing from inside the courthouse and our MS Now producer are important because it means that the Secret Service and the government, the Department of Justice, have concluded that based on that manifesto, which a part of which you just read, that Mr. Allen intended to assassinate Donald Trump in addition to other administration officials, if not Kash Patel, that he was describing Donald Trump when he said he could no longer stomach seeing this person who had embarrassed his country and coded him with embarrassment and humiliation.
Yeah, I mean, it's never the answer to go to violence. Let's bring in MS Now Justice and Intelligence reporter Ken Delaney, and he's outside of the courthouse. Ken, what can you tell us?
Katie, the first appearance for the defendant, Cole Allen, has just concluded, and the news out of this hearing was that he's been charged with attempting to assassinate the President of the United States in a newly unsealed criminal complaint. Also charged with transportation of a firearm and ammunition as part of interstate commerce and discharge of a firearm during a crime of violence. The charge of assaulting a federal official was not in this complaint. Also interesting is that he's being represented by a federal public defender, and he's being held over. Obviously, he's not being released, and a detention hearing is scheduled for 11 a.m. Thursday. And this was not an arraignment. There was no plea entered. This was simply a first appearance for this defendant in federal court. And now I'm about to go over to the Department of Justice, where officials are scheduled to have a news conference and hopefully tell us more about what they've learned about this defendant's actions and his potential motivations. Katie.
All right, Ken, thank you so much. Let's bring in former Secret Service Special Agent and DHS Advisor Charles Marino. I'm wondering, as we do the, after incident assessment of all of this, what is the lesson here?
Well, I don't think the question should or will be on the dedication to the mission of the men and women of the Secret Service who were on full display on Saturday night. That's unimpeachable. I think the focus will be on the protocols. Are the protocols of the Secret Service dynamic enough where they're keeping pace with the threat environment that we find ourselves in now, both as a country and specifically against this president and the administration and the other protectees that the Secret Service is responsible for? There's a solution to this, and it's at the hands of the Secretary of Homeland Security. And that is any large venue visited by the president can be declared a national special security event. It brings a whole of government approach. It keeps the Secret Service in charge, no different than what we see at the inauguration or State of the Union. Not only was this an attack on Saturday night against the president and the vice president, it was also an attack on the continuity of government based on who was in that very room that night. This could have disrupted the government significantly so. So the Secretary of Homeland Security can get the Secret Service some help here, more stringent protocols that match the threat level. Look, if we're willing to do it for the World Cup this summer, then we should be doing it for the President of the United States, regardless of party, when they go to these large venues.